Stepping on the Cracks by Mary Downing Hahn, Chapter 27. Gordy wasn't in school the next day. If it hadn't been pouring down rain, Elizabeth and I would have gone to his house, but even our umbrellas and boots didn't keep us dry. We were soaked by the time we got home. Daddy says Mr. Smith won't be in jail long, Elizabeth told me. We were on her front porch, and the rain pouring down off the eaves curtained us from the street. It was like being behind a waterfall. They charged him with being drunk and disorderly, Elizabeth went on. But if Mrs. Smith doesn't accuse him of anything else, he'll be free as a bird in no time. It's not fair, I said. The police should know she's scared of him. Wouldn't you be afraid to make him mad? For an answer, Elizabeth clenched her fist and pretended to sock Mr. Smith. Not me, she boasted. If I ever get married and my husband treats me bad, he'll be sorry. In silence, we watched the rain. It was coming down so hard that drops the size of silver dollars bounced up from the sidewalk. Garfield Road was a sheet of muddy brown water. A car passed slowly, up to its hubcaps and puddles. It left a wake behind like a boat. While we stood there, I heard a door open. Looking at my house, I saw Mother on the porch, peering through the rain and frowning. I wondered where you were, Margaret, she said. Come on home before you catch your death. I bet you're soaked. After I put on an old pair of Jimmy's overalls, I sat down at the kitchen table. Mother set a cup of steaming Ovaltine in front of me, and I drank it slowly, enjoying the taste of chocolate and the little trace of bitter iron it hid. Outside, drops of rain slid down the window pane as if they were racing each other. You could hypnotize yourself watching them. Well, Mother's voice broke into my trance. I suppose you know about the goings-on yesterday at the Smiths' house. I stared at her solemnly over the rim of my cup. The clock ticked cheerfully, and the rain drummed against the glass, making the kitchen safe and warm. Mentally, I contrasted our house with the Smiths' house, where no one was safe, not even Mr. Smith. Not even Mrs. Smith. Leaning toward Mother, I said, Elizabeth and I saw Mr. Crawford take Mr. Smith away in his police car, and then they took Stuart to the hospital in an ambulance. Do you know if Stuart's okay? According to one of his neighbors, Mr. Smith beat Stuart unconscious. He fractured his skull and broke his arm. Mother looked down at the table and moved her finger along one of the patterns painted on its metal surface. Maybe I should have told Mr. Crawford about the day we went to that house with Gordy and June, Mother said. But I just turned my back and tried to forget what I'd seen. All my life, I've believed you shouldn't interfere in other people's business. But now I feel bad, especially about that poor woman. How about Stuart? I asked her. He's the one who's really hurt. Did you know he was hiding in that hut in the woods? Mother asked. Is that why you tried to steer me away from it the day we cut the tree down? With her looking me straight in the eye, I couldn't lie. Feeling important, I said, we were helping Stuart, Elizabeth and me. Defying her to punish me, I added, he was sick, and we brought him food and medicine. We probably saved his life. For a moment, Mother didn't say anything. She sat very still, staring at me as if I were a stranger. You helped a deserter? She said at last, her face pale. You went down there in the woods where you are absolutely forbidden to go and helped a deserter when your own brother was overseas fighting for his country. Yes, I said, that's just what I did, and I'm glad of it. Just because Stuart didn't want to go to war and kill people doesn't mean he's bad. He's a coward, Mother said, her voice full of ice, and I'm ashamed of you. Tears sprang to my eyes. It wasn't until now that I realized I'd wanted Mother to be proud of me for helping Stuart. Hadn't she liked him? That he was her favorite paper boy? Now she was behaving as if he weren't even human. Ignoring my tears, Mother said, how do you think Jimmy would feel if he knew his own sister was helping a deserter while he lay dying in Belgium? It wasn't like that, I said, stung by the unfairness of the question. Stuart was sick. He needed me. I wish Jimmy had been down there in the woods too. Then he'd be alive and not dead. Mother slapped me then, as hard as she could, right in the face. Never say anything like that again, she cried. Never. Your brother died for his country. He paid the price so we could live in a better world when this war is over. Go to your room and stay there. You don't understand anything, I shouted at her. Then I ran up the stairs 2 at a time, slamming my bedroom door. I threw myself down on the bed and wept. My heart was full of rage at the unfairness of everything. I hated Mother, I hated Hitler, I hated Mr. Smith. I must have cried myself to sleep because the next thing I knew, my room was dark, and I was still lying on my bed, shivering in the cold. The only sound was the rain pelting against the windows. Then I heard Mother's footsteps on the stairs. Closing my eyes, I rolled over and faced the wall. For once, Mother could look at my back and see how she liked being ignored. Margaret, Mother opened my door. An array of light from the hall fell across my bed. When I didn't say anything, she sat down beside me. Touching my shoulder, she leaned over, trying to see my face. Margaret, she repeated, I know you're not asleep. Please sit up. I want to talk to you. Reluctantly, I did as she asked, but I kept my head turned away from her. I'm sorry I hit you, Mother began. I lost my temper. I know that's no excuse, but I was so mad. Probably Mr. Smith tells Gordy the same thing after he beats him, I muttered. Mother swallowed hard and turned my face toward her, forcing me to look at her. I'm still angry about your helping Stuart, she said. Desertion is wrong, Margaret. And if anyone finds out what you did, you could get into a lot of trouble. I shrugged. Even if I go to jail, I'll still be glad I helped Stuart. Mother sighed. You're just a child, Margaret, she said. If you were older, you'd understand how serious this war is. I didn't argue, but in my heart, I was sure Mother was wrong. My feelings didn't have anything to do with being a child, except I couldn't put them in words. I knew the war was serious. I knew we had to stop Hitler. But if you truly believed killing was wrong, what were you supposed to do? Stuart ran off and hid in the woods, Mother went on. Did that make the war end any sooner? Did it save any lives except his own? I twisted one of my braids around my finger so tightly it hurt, but I didn't have an answer. It was so confusing. All I could see was Stuart's sad face, pale and thin, almost hidden by his hair and beard, the way he'd looked when I first met him. I could hear him say, killing is wrong. I can't do it. I won't shoot anybody. I thought about the poem he'd asked Elizabeth and me to read to him, the one about the soldier who would have preferred to drink a beer with his enemy instead of shooting him. People like Stuart are different, I finally told Mother. You can't judge him the way you judge other people. Jimmy called him the little poet. He would have wanted me to help Stuart. I know he would have. Don't bring Jimmy into this, Mother said. Why not? Jimmy liked Stuart. He took up for him when the other boys teased him. He knew Stuart couldn't defend himself. Mother sighed and ran a hand through her hair. In the dim light, her eyes sought the picture of Jimmy on my dresser. She stared at his smiling face as if he might tell her something. But my brother was as silent as my Sonia Henny doll poised on her skates beside the photograph. After thinking for a while, Mother said, Jimmy felt sorry for Stuart. Like you, he wanted me to do something about Mr. Smith, but I never did. The rain gusted against the window, and the train blew its whistle down the tracks. Otherwise, it was very quiet in my room. Stuart's had a hard life, Mother went on slowly, as if she was finding excuses against her will. He wasn't rough and tough like his brothers. I still remember him as a little boy crying over a squirrel Donald shot with an air rifle. That's what I mean, I said. Stuart can't stand to see anything hurt. Not a squirrel, not a person. Neither could Jimmy, Mother reminded me. But he went to war. He did what he had to do, even though it killed him. I sighed. We'd gone in a circle, and now we were right back where we'd started from. And there was no answer, no firm ground to stand on. Leaning against Mother, I felt her arm close round me, as if she wanted to protect me from the cracks I saw opening everywhere. Come down to dinner, Mother said softly. Your father's waiting to eat. Did you tell him about me and Stuart? I asked, suddenly fearful. It was one thing to make Mother mad. She'd get over it. But I wasn't sure about Daddy. He might never forgive me. Mother shook her head. I thought about it, she said, but he'd be more upset than I am. As we started downstairs, she turned and looked back at me. One thing I learned from this, she said, is to pay more attention to you, Margaret. I had no idea what you and Elizabeth were up to. If I hadn't been so preoccupied, I might have noticed. Silently, I followed her into the dining room and took my place at the table. Daddy was already seated. The evening star spread open beside him. Look at this, he said. We've taken 2 more bridgeheads over the Rhine. His fingers stabbed at the headlines, and he smiled at Mother and me. It won't be much longer now, he said. The next day, Mrs. Wagner told our class that Gordy wasn't coming back to school. His family has moved to North Carolina, she said. Elizabeth and I stared at each other, shocked. Gordy had left already? Without even saying goodbye? I looked at his empty desk. His books and papers were there, as untidy as ever. How could Gordy be gone? As soon as the dismissal bell rang, Elizabeth and I went to the Smith's house. The rain had stopped, but we were wearing boots to keep our shoes dry. We slopped through puddles on the road, making muddy waves with our feet. The damp sidewalk was littered with dead pink worms. But here and there, a crocus poked up on someone's lawn. It was almost March. The sky was blue, washed clean even of clouds. Despite this, Davis Road still had a dreary winter look.